Welcome to the Compass Conversations podcast. We're a community of professional peers who love learning with and from each other. In other words, we choose collaboration over competition. Every conversation here is organic. Even the opening topic isn't settled until 5 minutes before we hit record. And the rest is riffing off of each other's brilliance. Thanks for hanging out with us in a new paradigm of learning, teaching, and expansion, where presence and non-competitive conversation create the space to learn without having to be schooled. Please visit compassconversations.com to discover more about this peer community and to include yourself as a sponsor. Hey everybody, welcome to the next Compass Conversations podcast episode. I'm Carrie Lake, and I'm here today with Shay Stewart, Chris Adderson, Susie Cloutier, Gray Kyle Graves, and Carla Bauchmuller. Before we dive into our topic, which I'm really excited to see where we take this one, I will read our regular invocation that sets the foundation for the heart and the tone, creating this space where we can all enjoy our conversations with an open heart and just sharing what's true for us. These conversations are shared from our sense of connection, camaraderie, and love. This community of peers is curious to learn from and with one another, living, learning, and leading by example. We're exploring together, acknowledging the interspecies family on this planet, while lovingly including ourselves in the family of life, from the heart, for the heart. So thank you guys all for being here. Just before we hit record, as we always do, we just sort of discuss, what are we curious about? What do we want to play with today? And as we were introducing ourselves and just sharing a little bit about what we're each interested in, we noticed that there's an intersection for all of us around the multiple dimensions that our work touches. And I mean, multiple dimensions could point at a lot of different things, but in assisting horses to do well and feel good and recover from traumas and difficulties and pain, there are a lot of energetic resources, physical resources, knowledge resources. There's just a lot of dimensions that we bring to healing our horses. And we also recognize that necessarily when we start to address and bring forward all of those different dimensions of resources for the horse's well-being, we also end up really curious and interested in human well-being, almost like human well-being has a lot to do with the horse's well-being. I wonder if we might talk about that. We also talked about how that approach and the multidimensional approach, it starts to look like how we access our different networks in the world, an inner network, an external network, a human network, and a beyond human network. So there's a whole lot to play with in there. And I know it touches our hearts. So I can't wait to hear which heartstrings are plucked for each of us as we go through our conversation. And Susie, I would love to ask you where all this lands in your heart. What heartstrings get plucked when you just even hear about these topics? Where would you start us off here?
Oh gosh, I just, so many things hit me. And it's just kind of this like cosmic little explosion of goodness that starts coming out. As a horse rescue and as a sanctuary that specializes in really difficult guys, I often am looking at the idea of like disembodiment and then taking that and turning that into harmony. So not just harmony within the horse's self, but harmony within the greater, the greater location of where they're at, with the human people, the humans that are involved with them, that our goal is to help them find a harmonious and happy self with the land that they're on, with the resources that we give them, the food, the care, the listening. And what I just so love about this whole conversation that I can't wait to get into is that our vision is humans healing horses, healing humans over here. And I just keep thinking that we're not a point to point. Horses and humans are not a point to point. It's not transactional. We're not starting somewhere and ending somewhere, but we're constantly working this incredible loop with each other where we are buoying one up, and then they're buoying us up. And it's just becomes this incredible balance of just a community of care amongst species. And I just get so excited about that thought and the fact that other people are also feeling the same way.
Thank you so much. It makes me want to just go straight to Gray, because Gray is walking similarly, I think, in a lot of ways. Seems to me.
Well, yeah, I think that I love what you said about sort of that there's this community of care, because I think there's something that sort of that heartstring that gets plucked. There's a resonance that's happening between, I think, humans and horses, but to know that that is it's being felt, I think, much more broadly than that, that the vibration of that connection is able to, move out into the world and touch a lot more aspects of it. And I think that if we can consider ourselves as a part of something much bigger than us, much older than us, much wiser than us, I think that it allows us a space to operate with, maybe not without ego, but with less ego, to sort of like see what really is, rather than being attached to sort of our individual agenda or assumptions about what should be happening. I think when we can step back and see ourselves as a small part of a bigger thing, there's a lot more information available about the next step forward. So it allows us, I think, to just not only know that there's a lot of resources available out in the world, but also to hear which is the right thing to call on. Who do we need to call on? By, I don't mean necessarily a person, but maybe it's an animal, or maybe it's a plant, or that there may be the right resource, the right support available, if we can know that it's not just us here trying to figure out what's the best thing for this horse or this person.
Yeah.
Susie, did you have something? I have a question, but I want to give you the chance to speak if you have something.
Sorry, maybe my brain's moving faster today, but Gray, I love what you said about shoulding. Should. I call it shoulding all over myself. Yeah. Don't should yourself. Because every time I find myself saying that, I realize that I've taken this huge global view and I've put it down to this one outcome, which is super predatory, because that's what we are. And I'm like, whoa, stop shitting all over yourself, back up and look at the whole picture. And I just love the way you did that. Like, where are you going to grab for your resources? Who's got them, and the greater who. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, the question that came to me was, Greg, could you speak more, or anybody speak more about the idea of the being less egoic? And is there a difference? Is it egoic to want the horses to be better? Is it egoic to want myself to be better? Because that's saying, oh, I should be better. Maybe I shouldn't, maybe I shouldn't be this way. Maybe I should heal faster. What do you guys think about that nuance? I mean, it's kind of a sensitive nuance, but I imagine, Carla, that's got to come up in your work a ton as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's this, I see it as a process, where people are in this kind of personal world where they try to make their thing work, and it's all about them. And that's where the egoic, right? The egoic part where it's personal. And then it becomes more and more transpersonal. The more you go into through transformation, the more you see other beings like humans, animals, spiritual beings, and you feel more connected, right? Where it's there, and you step out of the isolation. So often we are in that isolation because we all feel we are separated from each other. There's that person and I'm over here. There's that animal, I'm over here. And the horses teach us to feel that sense of connection more. But then I feel we also then start seeing that with others, right? The more we step into this, the more we see that with other people as well. And I was always, when we started this conversation, I thought to myself, for me personally, I loved horses, like from early on, but it took me a long time to start to love people. Right. And when you, especially when you work with horses and when you're like a trainer, clinician, instructor, or even body worker, it's not enough to love horses. You need to love people too, and care about them as well. Right. And so that took me some time. And I think that's also true for lots of people who are like horse women who start focusing on their love for the horses, which is so much easier. Right, it's so much easier to love animals than people, So I see sometimes people really focusing on their love for the animals, but then opening up to the love for humans and others and community and nature, etc. So I think that's always a process there as well.
Mm.
Yeah, there's an aspect of that when we say I love horses. That's the thing I want to do. I think it goes back to the idea that it's like, I don't get to decide what my little piece is, right? It's not, that's kind of not, or maybe that would be ego motivating. Like, what I want is time with horses. I don't want time with people, or to think about the land, or to think about my neighbors, or that kind of thing. Is that it's really, if we can step back, that that separation of me from you, it's like, not like, well, I probably, going back to the shoulding, like Susie said, I should like people more, I guess. If I'm gonna help horses, I guess I probably should like people. It's that we branch out and say, this is the thing that's happening now. It's not necessarily my plan, and maybe the thing that I wanted to do is not the thing that needs to happen next. So I think that question, Carrie, that you asked about, is an ego that strives, that sort of pushes us to be better. I don't think ego is good or bad. But the question I think that follows is, do I want to get better so that I look better, so that I have more, whatever, credibility, or so that I have my case studies look awesome? Or, is it an external thing that says, like, I'm gonna try to get better to this external end? Or is it I'm being sort of, that's what's required, or that's what I feel called to in this situation? Maybe I need to really learn about this thing, or really practice this thing, or maybe I need to get out of the way and and just listen to what the horse has to say. Maybe I need to do nothing. Maybe I need to phone a friend and say, you getting any hits about the next step forward? Because I don't know that I can detach myself from the outcome here and be more neutral. I think it's more about, the ego isn't, it's like I said, I don't think it's a good or bad thing, but does it separate me from what's around me? Does it see me as a separate part?
That's a beautiful way to look at it. Yeah. To know, a lot of people get, they wonder, am I doing the right thing? Am I acting from my ego? And I think you just offered a really simple approach, Gray, which is the attitude that I wonder, is it my ego or not? Is that creating separation between me and the environment, the land, the air, the plants, the horses? Or is it bringing me closer in or letting them closer into my heart, which for me was the thing with humans. I asked horses long ago, like when I was 12, like, how do I help you? And how do you do it? How do you keep giving to people? And the response that always came led me toward the absence of judgment. And it still leads me toward letting others close to me, not defending myself so hard because of a projection of what might be bad for me, and I think that attitude might get in the way a lot of taking in the bigger picture, including the land, including the environment. If I include the environment, what's going to happen to me? If I include humans, then how's it going to affect me? And of course we have those thoughts, but they don't have to be the end point of how we move in the world. It doesn't have to be defining. Maybe we can just start asking more questions, instead of what's going to happen to me. We could ask, well, I wonder what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, I
Yeah,
saw
that curiosity is huge.
Sorry, Gray, what was that?
Just the curiosity piece, I think, is so important, so.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what everybody's been saying here. I wanted to touch a little bit on, I think what it comes down to is how we present ourselves to our horse or to other people or our community or the universe. And we have habitual ways of doing that from our history, things that have happened along the way, which is totally understandable. We've practiced that a long time. And we don't want to demonize the ego or any parts of our history that we have led us to where we are here. But in taking how we present ourselves and the community of care, I was just using that word today when I was out massaging my horse because she has sore feet. And so she's starting to really hold up her shoulders. So I go out and massage her. And I was using that word care. And what came to mind was that what we can do is we can undercare or we can overcare. And we want to be somewhere in the middle. So we want to be caring and present ourselves in a way that's caring to our horses or to anybody else. And sometimes we can get into the place where we think we're caring, but it's actually not, right? It's actually kind of a fake caring. And so if we can recognize those places when we are, on that spectrum, we're in the place, we're in between the undercaring and the overcaring, but we're in between, and it's not fake, and it's right. What resources do we need to pull upon to be truly caring? What resources do we have within ourselves, or maybe what resources do we have to acquire from outside ourselves to be truly caring to that animal and what that animal needs, or the person needs, or right, what our community needs? So, and then that of course leads to feel, and how we care transmits in what we feel and what we receive, what we're allowing to come in and what we're giving permission for us to give and permission to receive. And those are sort of words that fit within the care. So community care, a community of care, is so broad, it's so huge, that we can focus on any aspect of it. But I just wanted to pull up that how we present ourselves to our animal and how we have the habits from our history that are totally understandable, how we can, access that middle place on the spectrum of undercaring and overcaring.
I can imagine that we've been, I hate to use the word set up, but our childhoods have formed us and our brains into what is socially acceptable and what's not socially acceptable, or what we think, again, what we're going to shut ourselves into. And I think that, and I can only speak from my walk as a person with PTSD and trying to figure out how to be embodied and regulated, and know, when the train's coming down the track or when it's about ready to roll me over, if it already rolled me over. So, this has been a long, I love what you're saying, Chris. It's been such a long mosey for me, and it feels like a mosey because you're over here, you're over there, but it in my mind, it really comes down to, self-awareness. Self-awareness leads to other awareness leads to mindfulness in experiencing others, versus, say, self-absorption, which is, how am I going to look coming out of this thing, which all of us struggle with, right? At this, what's the public perception going to be? But I love that mindfulness piece of it. To me, is so big, because it really does take this very, again, that narrow view, and it blows it out of the water. And it's like, if you're mindful, not mind filled, how are you going to open yourself up to what path is the right path between you and your horse? How are you going to listen? Are you listening well? Are you hearing what you want to hear? Are you phoning a friend, right? Like Grace says, are you comfortable phoning a friend and going, I'm stuck? I got no idea. I've phoned so many friends with a little mule we have for so many years. It's like, okay, we're over that. I'll go anywhere, right? But I love the way you put that. How do we find that regulation, and how do we find that self-awareness at any time to do best at what we should be doing best for, which is making another being's life well, right?
Right. Yeah, we have such a learned history of performing a certain way, like we care, but we don't really care.
Yeah.
So yeah, the self-awareness is a huge part, getting into that and figuring out where we're at. There was another part that you mentioned. Oh, you mentioned mindfulness. I also wanted to, like, because we were talking about the multi-dimensional aspect of this. So there is the mindfulness, but there's also what I call tunefulness, and being able to tune into our minds, our emotions, and our movement, what our body is actually doing, because these things are all interconnected. And if we have a learned history of performing in a certain way, let's say you have to up the phases if your horse isn't doing what you ask, and so you find yourself falling into that pattern, that's residual. It's somewhere in your body as well. It's somewhere in your movement. It's stuck somewhere in there. So I know that movement isn't addressed a lot of the time, when we talk about mindfulness, but I call it tunefulness, and that's being tuneful to what our bodies are actually doing. So where is that emotion, or where have we learned that thing in the past that's stuck somewhere that we need to jiggle it out, get it out, so that then when we're speaking to our horses through movement, it's not that stuck place that they can pick up on so well. If we don't find those stuck places, that will put static in the communication between us and our horses, or us and another person. And being a professional dancer, right, that was for many years, that's what I did, was study movement and how to move and the emotions that come through the body when you move. So yeah, the mindfulness, being tuneful to your body, the self-awareness of your mind, emotions, body.
The idea, thank you, Chris, you've spoken so beautifully. The word and the idea of care just keeps pulsing for me. And it comes largely, like, looking at my own journey, I didn't really know what care felt like. And like you were just saying, Chris, we've been conditioned to do things, but not because we care about them. I might shift that a little bit to say we do things because we care about something. There's something that we care about that makes us stand up and take action. It might be survival. It might be avoidance of, a response. But the world changes when we really get a sense of what it feels like to be cared for and to let care happen in our own body. And Shay, I'm going to go to you in a minute, because the work that you do, I think, speaks directly to this on a multidimensional level. But and I just love to hear your experience. But the other paradigm that's in my mind with respect to care is a lot of people will ask me, if they have an elderly or dying animal, and they just want to know, they want their animal to know how much they care, how much does he know how much I love him? I just want him to know how much I love him. And almost invariably, checking in with the animals and listening and tuning myself, the guidance that ends up coming through is to let the animal care for you. Let them love you, right? If you want them to know how much you love them, let them love you, because then you're both feeling love. Often when people are trying to do upon and make something else, change or be better for another, we become unidirectional. And that's not a fault of anybody. I think it has a lot to do with our performance conditioning. And so my question is, when have you guys become aware of what it feels like to truly receive care? Can you share your own experiences of actually receiving care? And how did you know? How did you know that that's what it was?
For me, it was actually in one of the first regression courses where I was a participant, and that was, I think, in my 30s. Yeah, like 30, 35 or something like that. So fairly late in life in a way, right? But when we were going back into childhood experiences, and then with a kind of challenging relationship to my parents, still feeling that I was loved as a child, right? But the memory of it was more like, oh, it was just a struggle, challenge, etc. But there was actually the love that I had forgotten about. I just remember the challenging times, but I didn't really remember where I felt loved by my parents. And then from that experience, other experience of feeling loved in everyday life started opening up, where I feel loved by my animals, loved by my clients, loved by, friends, etc. And it opened me up to really listening to all these places where love is coming my way, but I have to open to it, right? If I stay closed, then this love that's coming my way is just running against the wall. So the opening part of it has always been the challenging part. I think not just for myself, probably for everybody. I think opening and learning to open, that's probably the most important piece in maybe all of what we are saying right now. Are we able to open? What does opening really mean? As long as we stay closed, or animals stay closed, there's not that flow of giving and receiving.
Yeah. I think the opening up to being loved is so hard for some people, and many people, right? We're protected because what it does is it makes us very vulnerable, and vulnerability is scary as hell. And, we're like, this person may love me, and maybe in our past, we may have had conditional love, but this person may love me, or this situation, this animal, but they're going to leave me, they're going to hurt me, they're going to this, so I'm not going to crack open to that. But what a waste, right? To not do that. Like, what a waste. It took me till my 30s too to figure that out. Like, that's right. Open up to love, because it's unconditional. And one day it may be gone, but it's unconditional. It is filling your bank. You know, what a bank account to fill, to be so loved by so many, right? And then to be able to turn around and give that back, to know what it feels like to honestly give someone unconditional love is pretty dang cool. And I love that bank filling analogy, which is like, my gosh, my savings account is full and overflowing. How wonderful. There's so much more to give away.
Yeah, it's interesting, the aspect of I think that this you asked that question, Carrie. I was like, "Oh, she getting personal." She's gonna make
Sorry,
a
not
big
sorry,
deal
you know.
here and reveal. No, I think it's good because it's vulnerability, right? But I think that on some level, going back to the sort of aspect you were talking about sort of the intersections of connection, or to be coming from a place that's more aware of being part of a whole rather than separate from, is that I love that you brought up, Chris, the aspect of dance. Is that I was thinking about with horses that the part of, I think, what people struggle with is not learning how to move, but it's allowing ourselves to be moved, to allow the movement of the horse through our body, to actually like receive that movement, receive that energy, and be a part of that, rather than figuring out what does my body need to do and your body need to do. It's that there's a movement that's coming through us, you know, and it's a movement that the horse cantering is my body is being receiving and being moved by that. Also, the horse is blending with the earth as they push off, right? It's like that's a receiving too. There's so many. It's not there's not a lot of hard lines. So I think that when you talk about vulnerability, I understand like the aspect of it being scary, but to me it feels, how do I say this? The boundary that separates me and you, or me and my horse, the idea that we're two separate things, that to me it feels way scarier, because now I'm out here like on my own. I'm just me, rather than being like, oh, I'm a part of this thing. And if we are able to muster the faith that there's a lot of, that everything's available, right? That the all of it, the joy and the pain and the love and the suffering, that it's all available here, right? So we don't really, well, there's a way we can look at it that we don't need to, or really kind of get to decide what is and is not around us. We can sort of think that we have the ability to choose what does and doesn't come in. But I think that we could also look at it that it's all here. We can participate or not, you know, and then we can, you know, choose our perspective of how we're participating or what actions we take. But it's not, I think if we're looking at this in a way where we're not really separating, having these boundaries or defenses that keep things out, right, and also keep things from coming in, right? Totally, if we can separate that, then it's all, we don't really need to think about it too much. It's all there, and if with a quiet mind we can just be part of it. I hope.
Oh my gosh, I love what you just said, because it takes so much thinking to try to manage all of the rules and what comes in and what doesn't. And what strikes me is that just because there's the experience of vulnerability doesn't necessarily mean I am at threat. And
right,
the discernment
we're a part
of that, right? Shay, I want to open some space to see if there's anything you'd like to share or bring into the conversation.
I've had so many thoughts with everybody. Everybody has touched on so many different aspects of all of this. And going back to when we were talking about overcare and what does it feel like to truly be cared. I think for me that has a lot to do with being present and being around other beings that are present. And humans tend to orient to the busyness of our minds instead of the wisdom of our body. And one thing horses have taught me was how to be more in my body. And they're so empathic. They taught me how to appreciate other humans and how to be with people and how to appreciate what other people have to offer. They're so forgiving. And one thing that we tend to do as humans is we tend to narrow our focus, and we're always trying to fix what's wrong.
Mm.
And I like to try to what horses have taught me as well, to widen that field of perspective and focus on, you know, what's good, what's healthy, what's right, and live in that and embrace that. And especially when it comes to if you think about like our thoughts carry a vibration, and when we have if we're negative or if we're positive, that there's a electromagnetic field that emits that vibration of that thought. And other animals like horses and dogs and birds and whatever feel that, and they feel that vibration of how we're thinking and what we're thinking. And if you're I used to work with a lot of horses that were rescued, and I did a lot of rehab type training. And one of the things I learned was not to live in that story of what happened, what was wrong, what went wrong, because it's disempowering for them to feel that pity, to, you know, feel sorry, and learn to open up and just widen my perspective and focus on I don't know, just what's right, you know. And I don't know if I'm speaking out of left field, but these are all just my thoughts that I've had listening to all this. And I think it impacts everything around us, the way we think or overthink, or when we're not in our bodies, it impacts. I mean, think how amazing the world would be if everybody lived more from their heart and oriented to the wisdom of their heart, and instead of this busy buzzy mind that we tend to, you know, overthink and orient to. I don't know, just my ramblings.
Can I?
Go ahead, Susie.
Sorry, your ramblings are brilliant. When you said getting stuck, I think about the stories. You know, here we have stories behind animals that came in. They had a story. They show up. Everybody wants to know the story. And I used to tell the story. And what I found when I tell the story of someone's past is that I was caused to live in that story. Well, the animal was not living in that story. They were right this second, they were living in right now. And then in 2 seconds, they're living 2 seconds later. They're not stuck there. And what I watched is the energy shift around everybody about, oh, got that palm up. poor little, I'm like, oh my God, you change everything to like like ongoing and forever pity for this creature that's badass, right? And it was something to learn to get out of the story, right? Also, can I riff on this for a quick second, because Carrie's heard me talk about this before. I'm a wildlife biologist, so I'm kind of a mammal nut job. And the reality is we're predators, and we are really good at focusing in on one thing. And being disingenuous is a predatory response. We haven't been wearing pants for very long to say that we can fully be embodied all the time, that our brain and our body are not always in sync. They're not always doing the same thing. So, and horses are prey animals, and they pick up all of the energetics around them. And we have that ability too, but it's so innate within them. And I just want to use a quick story of one of our Mustangs, Bodie. I was having excuse my French, shit day. Came out one summer morning to put a fly mask on Bodie, and outside the door went, okay, let's go in, right? Total disingenuous, really having a crummy morning. Walked down, the horse who's put his fly mask on willingly for years and years, looked at me, ran backwards out of the stall and stood at the back of the paddock and was like, don't you get near me, woman. And I sat there and I went, what's wrong with you? And then I realized, and then I heard back, well, Mom, what's wrong with you? And I thought, oh my God, I'm not being who I am. I'm not being resonant. The outside's not reflecting the inside. And I think that horses, sometimes they don't care what we are on the inside. We can be a dumpster fire. As long as we're an external dumpster fire, they're like, got it, no problem. I'm picking you up. And the minute I just kind of let all that go and went, oh, buddy. And I cried. I just was having the worst morning. And he walked up, he's like, put the mask on. Let's go. Thanks for resonating exterior with interior as a predator. And I think we miss that a lot in our relationships with horses. And like, we don't necessarily speak the same language. And we actually speak an opposite language most of the time when we're not being mindful or embodied in our conversation with them. So thanks for bringing that up.
It took me, the last few minutes has taken me in a beautiful place with respect to this idea of, pity, whether it's another person or an animal. If we approach them in the story with this field of energy that's charged with pity and sympathy and wishing things were different, I'm having a fun time back here playing with our wider network of nature and the natural world and forests and oceans and the land and the microbiomes, and how often our thoughts about the external living world, that how horrible humans are, and all the destruction and all of the pity and all of the hate. So, it just makes me curious, back to what Shay said, which is my perpetual question, is what happens when more and more people truly walk it from a coherent heart and live and act from a coherent heart? Would there still be so much pity about environmental destruction, or would that conversation also change?
I think, what if we took the idea of pity and we made it and we just changed that word to information? So this is pretty Buddhist thought of like, everything is information. And when I think about the greater world as an environmental person for, however many years, nothing exists in a vacuum. Our horses don't, we don't, that tree doesn't, the grass doesn't. We have a vast network of mycorrhizal fungi under our feet at all times that is making everything, pulse from the ground up, and it's supporting my horses so they can eat that food. The horses' manure is landing on that ground and it's nourishing it. And again, it's that whole cycle going on. I think it's easy to be pretty terrified over our future: war, destruction, environmental mayhem. But what if we approach that idea of like, let's do all we can do as us people get overwhelmed. I want to do all I can do, and I'm still not winning. I'm like, we may not win in the more cohesive term, but we will do what we can do in this life for each other and this earth, and consider it fulfilling, right? And consider these things that thrive and strive on the ground and in the air and in the sea, and say, there's resilience all around us. It's not just us that has to be resilient, or our horses. It's everything that we step on, and everything that we drink, and everything that we breathe. There's an insane amount of resiliency in the natural environment.
I agree with that. And our natural world is in a constant state of regeneration. And so are our bodies. There's an underlying health that's always working. It's always there. And what we focus on expands. And so I think if we did change our conversation on the environment and focused on the regenerative, restorative, the health, then it would change. I think there's a great benefit in that. Just with like I'll use an example of when in the work that I do, one of the things that I've learned with horses is they will, I don't know how to explain this in a short amount of time, but when we're working on a horse and we're orienting to the health, if we get too narrow focused on fixing a problem, going back to that, they don't like it, and they'll tell us in some way. But when we expand out and focus on nature, or focus on health, there's a relational field that settles, and everything gets soft and still, and it feels good. And I lost what all I was going to say about that, but that's kind of my thoughts about it.
I love that, Shay. I think that's great, because you're pulling together what Susie was saying about the information, right? It's all just information that we're collecting from our horses, if we give ourselves permission to collect it. And then if we view it as just information, then there's no judgment. But being humans, if we then focus and drill in that we have to fix something, that's when they don't like it. But then if we can look at the broader picture and view it as caring in between the two ends, we're caring, we're helping. So the question is, how can I help you? With this information you're giving me, how can I help you? And then we can, we're going to feel pity and sympathy, right? We have these emotions coming through us, but if we can recognize and acknowledge those emotions and say, that's okay. Yeah, I feel really sad for my horse that's hurting right now, or whatever. We recognize that emotion, and then open to what the information that we just received is giving us, and how we can then discern what to do next in the framework of being caring and how can I help you.
The feeling is very different between discerning and fixing, right? Or identify and hunt down and change is very different than discerning and the listening. I think I watch in the grander scheme of things, all of life is already in motion toward wholeness. Speaking of, like, Shay said about everything is so regenerative and resilient, that movement is innate. And there's almost nothing that we have to do to make something recover. It's more like creating the space so that whether it's a horse or a person or my own emotions or a friendship, if we can create the space without the force or pressure, then recovery finds itself, regeneration finds itself. And if we just going to a social, broader social example, is the first 2 weeks of lockdown in 2020, when the whole earth was like, oh, hey, we have color and clear skies. This is what it is, there. And there's so much, to me, it's so valuable to use mindfulness in a way that lets us be available for that information, to be available to see where things are already informing how we can help, and what kind of space they need to regenerate, And I keep feeling like I want to go over to Gray, because I feel like I just feel like you have a lot of experience in that realm. And I'm just super curious what you might say.
In the realm of
Offering space where beings can recenter, reorient to who they are.
Yeah, I think that I love what everybody's been saying. I think that if we believe that the energy of resilience, the energy of regeneration, and the practice of regeneration is happening all the time, I think it gives us a lot more options moving forward. I got to work with Linda Tellington Jones in the past, and she said, we heal till we die. And I just love that. It's like, that's the practice, that's the practice, is that we're healing all the time. And I think that our role in it, I think it's a really beautiful intention to say, how can I help you as you're approaching our horses? And also another way to ask that question is, what is helpful here? What, maybe maybe me stepping back is what's helpful here, or maybe I need to be moved, like maybe I feel moved to do something that maybe appears to have nothing to do with the issue the horse is having. Shay, I loved you bringing up that the horses don't like it when you are looking at the problems to be fixed. Years ago, I was studying craniosacral therapy, and came back and thought, oh, we had a horse with wobblers, and I was like, well, I'm gonna fix you. You're gonna be sound. And she promptly stepped on my foot and took me out for the rest of the day to be like, I think you need a little timeout. I think you need to reflect on your choices here. So I think that bringing that approach, like I think has been said a few times, of non-judgment, of it's not, we got a problem here, or that this is like, oh, good, we've got a really good thing happening here, that we're going to get, blue ribbons for this or whatever. Is that it's just, this is the way things are right now. In this moment, this is how things are right now. And coming from a belief of that, the power of healing and regeneration is that, and I'm not trying to be Pollyanna about it, like it might get really messy, I'm sure we've all had that experience with a horse or with a human, of being like, man, I believe in my heart this is going to work out the right way. It's pretty messy right now, and so I think that's a microcosm of, maybe a horse that's having a little bit of trouble with something you're working on. And there's a big picture of like, our existence on this planet is like, it's going to work out. I think it might get pretty messy, but I do believe that. And And I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but it motivates a sense in me that I don't need to work so hard to try to fix things. I don't need to. I think we need to all show up every day and try to be in the world in a way that we think is helpful or is caring, like you said, Chris. But not like, I'm gonna get out there and I'm gonna care as hard as I can, and I'm gonna help. I mean, I know I have done this a lot with horses. It's like, well, let me help with that, and they're like, that's not helpful. So we have to actually offer help that is helpful, right? We have to move in the direction that things are heading, right? Or supposed to be heading, whatever. I mean, supposed to be is like a very, very vague concept, but if there's a direction that feels right to be heading in, try to head that direction and not sort of think I need to work a lot harder to make this thing happen, because that almost never goes well in my experience with horses.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to help you so hard. Oh, I'm going to help you. Yeah, Carrie knows I've had that with a little mule for years now, until she finally got me to chill out and be like, hey, won't it be great if? And then we just go whatever direction she guides,
Yeah, if
but
you could just be here with me instead of trying to like help me so hard.
Yeah, can you just chill out and calm down? And we have this saying on our feed room wall, because we have a lot of volunteers that are horse novices here, that say, when in trouble, stop, breathe, wait for the answer, then proceed. Because there's so much that and I'm so guilty of it, of like trying to fix crap while I'm driving, going down the runway, ready to take off on something that a direction. I think there's going to be a plane there and we're probably going to fly, but, and it's really just a bus. And I think, that's just human nature, right? It's like, we pick our predatory thing, we pick our direction and we're like, that's what we're going to do. And they're like, no, thanks.
It sounds
I'm
more
curious
like,
if. Go ahead, Carla. Sorry.
yeah, it sounds more like really offering new options, right? So instead of like going back too much and seeing what's wrong and trying to fix it, you offer new options. And maybe the option is just hanging out, right? And creating connection this way, and just moving forward and being present, but moving forward at the same time. In the work with people, like in my experience, I want to go back to look at the trauma that has happened. So I go back and have a look at it. But then it's also the clarity that comes when you really see what has happened in your life, and with the clarity, then a letting go, and then an opening to the healing, to the resilience. But I want to take that step, right? With horses, it doesn't make that much sense, right? Because they cannot work through that trauma, and they can get really like clarity around that trauma as much. But we can go back, we can look at what has happened, what were my emotions when I was 5 years old and I was in that situation, and all the helplessness, etc. And when I'm then seeing, okay, but now I'm not 5, I'm 55, and I can let go, I can act differently now because I'm not in that helpless situation that I was in. But I find that this moment of clarity is really important, but then it's also really important to then not circle back to it over and over. Because I have some friends that keep saying, oh, I know why I'm responding this way, because it's my trauma from when I was 5 years old, right? And then they keep circling back and talking about creating neural pathways, right? So
Right.
it's the same thing. They're creating an autobahn towards that old trauma, and they are kind of reliving it in a way over and over, just mentioning it over and over. So that step of looking at something, and sometimes really deeply, or maybe also often, but with that intent to then look at the options, where we come back to the horses, right? Where we look at the options, how can I behave, live, connect differently than what I used to do?
Yeah.
Listening to, just great. I know you had something you were about to say, but just to respond to Carla, and tie it back into when did you realize that what you were experiencing was care for me, it was when like horses forever had listened to me in my fullness and never needed me to be different than what I was in that moment, right? If you're a train wreck on the inside, be a train wreck on the outside, and they're like, cool, we can hang out, right? But for me, to recognize the experience of care in relation to a human was when I realized a human was listening to me like a horse does, with no judgment, not needing me to be different than I am. And it changed the way my life force moved in my body, created space for my life force to actually inhabit my body, rather than having to defend against the existence of my own life force that just wanted to be free. Short way of saying that is the absence of judgment. Listening in the absence of judgment is what brought care, what brought my awareness to the felt information that we call cared for. And Carla, that's what I hear you pointing at as well, is listening in a way that acknowledges, but doesn't re-empower a hurt of the past, or a misinterpretation, right? Or a misunderstanding of the past that that kept that hurt alive. But Gray,
Yeah.
we've got maybe 5 or 7 minutes left. So Gray, what is it that you wanted to say?
Oh, I had a separate question that I don't think is relevant. But
You can throw
yeah,
that.
I like I think this goes back to what Shay had brought up as well, about just really being present, like what is here. And I think that, yeah, it's interesting for the horses. It seems like the reason they feel the way they do is not terribly important to them. How they feel may I don't know if they say matters, but they're going to show us, they're going to act the way they feel, right? We've been talking about that idea of kind of congruency. So, but it's interesting. I think about, I've certainly had the experience, Carla, like you were describing, of, going back and understanding how patterns were developed, or where a feeling maybe has taken root. And I wonder what it would be like for us also to just maybe be a little less attached to why we feel the way we feel, and just let the feelings kind of show up as information, like it's been mentioned also, and again, I'm not saying it's good or bad to go back, but I think that thing people do where they'll kind of loop a story, it keeps us out of the present sometimes. So yeah, I do think that what is, I think there are a lot of different ways to develop a depth of understanding of who we are in the world. And I think being curious about it and exploring it is always useful. I think.
And I think, like you said earlier too, playing with this, getting super curious, like what does it actually mean that I'm part of a whole? That the only time I feel unsafe is if I do have a hard boundary between me and my horse, or me and another. And it's just going to ask us to have a different relationship with the information we feel, that we would call maybe vulnerability or emotion or history, because it's all just helping this guy, as I see it anyway, helping the thinker have a different relationship with that level of information.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I love, there's so many different approaches to it. Like Shay doing the craniosacral, to me, is just like such low frequency, like foundational approach that takes, I think it takes some development for people to be able to tune into it, but receiving that kind of care is just so like can reset the whole system, and reset your entire view of how you relate to everything, all the other information in the world.
just having the system, going back to being present. Presence recognizes presence. So the system recognizes that. And it gives our nervous systems are designed, our whole body is designed to feel and sense. And when we have the gift of another being present, it really helps us feel safe and be seen and all of that. Heal, let go of what doesn't need to be swirling around in there.
Presence is the space where healing just keeps happening. Like Linda Tellington Jones, keep healing till you
Heal till we die.
That's right.
That's right.
Oh, I love it. And thank you, horses and nature and wind and sunshine and trees. Thank you for all of life, for being this constant reminder of what presence can feel like, what presence feels like, so that we can bring our awareness to it. And like Susie said, amplify, what you bring, was it Susie or Shay? I don't remember. What you put your awareness on expands it. And I mean, that's just physics, right? The more we play with bringing our awareness to that caring space and offer it everywhere we go, I wonder how life unfolds when we walk this way.
That so brings to mind a quote that I love so much. It's what is it? What you perceive, you believe, and eventually you receive. And our perceptions as we, walking through life, perceiving things in one single way is really going to build our life. And how do we want to look at it?
Mm-hmm. And the beauty, I think that's part of the beauty of being human, is we have the capacity to change that. We have the capacity to bring flexibility into our perception. And through that presence and caring, have this capacity to reorient and highlight a different perception. And we get to choose. That's how we get to create. I'd like to create health and wellness in the global environment. Well, where would we like to put our awareness, Oh, thank you guys so very much. We just have a couple minutes left. Any last words, any last questions, any last anything you guys would like to bring in before we close?
I have one thing I wanted to say. We started out with the multidimensional aspect of things, and then Carrie, you mentioned how we get unidirectional, and then somebody else mentioned about the focus and how we focus to fix things. And then Carrie, you said let the animal care for you, or let the horse care for you. I thought that was brilliant, because we do get unidirectional and focused on over caring for our horse. But when you flip it around and you let the animal care for you, and try to think of a situation where you had an animal that cared for you, and when did you really realize that you knew that that animal was caring for you? I think that's beautiful.
That's even just you talking about it. I'm like, ooh, my heart's all excited.
Lots to chew on, right?
So much to play with. Oh my goodness. Everybody, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing from your heart and contributing the wisdom and the curiosity. I will absolutely look forward to the next time we get to chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.